what I kind of want to do during this workshop is kind of just walk you through all the steps of how to tab a tournament in Tabbycat. I can also explain a little bit about Tabby2 or tournament, but Tabbycat is right now very much preferred because we have online tournaments, and this is the best way to connect it to Zoom, because there have been some bots have been written about this. Taptastic is the latest one, which is really great. Also very useful, so you can actually connect the draw and Tabbycat entirely to Discord, and it also creates CSV files for Zoom, where you can assign people to breakout rooms, which makes it way less of a hassle to actually do an online tournament. So I don't know how much you know about dabbing or debating in general. I take it most of you have been to debating tournaments before. I once had to explain to some people how to tab a tournament while they had never been to a tournament before. If you have never been to a tournament before, let me know. Otherwise, I'll just continue. I think questions. If you want to ask a question, just say something in the chat and then unmute yourself. So I'll first stop talking and tell you that you can ask a question. I think that's the best option. I kind of wanted to make it as interactive as possible, so I've set up Tabbycat instance, and everyone can have their own separate account where they can log into the Tabbycat instance and do the same thing as I'm gonna do. Like, I'm gonna show you how to do certain stuff, and then you can do it yourself, so you actually learn how to do it directly. First of all, what do you guys think is the most important thing for a dabber? Like, what are the best characteristics a dabber should have? Be precise, be aware. So, Alec, what do you mean with being aware?
Well, like, you don't want someone who didn't realize an extra 5 teams had registered a minute before the deadline, or that somebody come up to them and said, hey, there's a big problem with me and this guy, and that person's like, oh, I know that guy, he's great, I don't think you should worry about it. You want someone who's like aware of people's needs and logistics.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Relax at all times, definitely. So when I started tabbing, I didn't know shit about tabbing at all. But I was doing this tournament with my best friend. She was convener and I was tabbing, and at some point she was just really stressed, walked into the tab room, which was like this room of calm, kind of like the eye in the storm. And she just couldn't stand being there because she was so stressed and I was so calm. But if you're really calm and really relaxed all the times, it tells the CAs in your org team, like, hey, it's gonna be okay. I know what I'm doing. Don't worry about the tab. It's gonna be fine. Be well organized, definitely. If you don't know what you're doing, you're gonna run late. And if you're organized as well, you will know, you have all the steps in your head, like, okay, I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do this, etc. So you have to have a good overview of what you need to do. Then I think this kind of ties into what Alex said, is that you don't necessarily have to be like really a people person. I don't think I'm that much of a people person, but you do have to be really good at talking to all different kinds of people and making sure that they do what you want them to do. Try to be kind about this. There's this general idea about deaf people, at least from Iona, though it has has become a bit less, that they can be kind of dicks or that they scream at people at times. You shouldn't do that as a tab master. Like, I don't think you should. I don't think it's necessary. I do think that you have to be really careful how you treat certain people, because invaders can be quite sensitive. But you have to try to find a way to make sure that they do understand that what they did was very stupid, but still be nice about it. That's kind of like probably the most important parts about being a tabber. Though one extra thing, do not be impressed about the people around you. So if your CAs are have won worlds, or if some of the judges in the room that are running late have done something great, don't be impressed by them. Or, well, you can be impressed by their achievements, but don't necessarily look up to them. Like, I'm the boss and I'm gonna tell you what to do. And don't be afraid about that. So when I started tabbing, I didn't even know that Worlds and Euros existed. And then one of the CAs was this Worlds winning judge. And so what happened was that at some point I was just like, okay, now you have to shut up and do this, because I want you to do this. We need to do this right now. And he just looked at me like, whoa, okay, I'm just gonna do this now because I told him to. Whereas if you're like impressed by them or look up to them too much, you won't tell them, or you'll be too patient or just too shy to tell them. They're just, I guess, they're just normal people. And you have to realize that it's all just normal people around you, and in a sense you're the senior of them. One other important thing is that when you're tabbing a tournament, at some point you'll be tabbing, like, you will have tabbed about 10 tournaments or something. So you know more about tournaments and tournament logistics than most people. Like, most people will organize a tournament maybe once or twice, whereas you will have seen way more tournaments than anyone else, at least from their organizational side of it. So if you see something going wrong with the org team, or like, hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? Maybe you should think about this, or maybe you should do it this way or this way. So in a sense, kind of also support the org team, and kind of look out for them in a sense. So if the tournament runs late, it's usually, people usually think it's the tab's fault. In my case, it's like 80% of the time it's not my fault, because then something just went wrong with the organization, or maybe the lunch is running late or something, or there weren't enough runners. So have a checklist for yourself, like, okay, so the org team has to do this kind of stuff. Are they aware that they have to organize this kind of stuff? And if they're not, how can you help them to make sure that they will have this organized stuff in place? Some of it you can ask before the start of the tournament. Other things you might just want to ask on the day itself. I think this is more of a thing with offline tournaments than with online tournaments. Yeah, because there's more stuff the org team has to organize. But I think it goes for both cases, but more for offline tournaments. Does anyone have any questions so far?
Yeah, sorry, I do actually.
Go ahead.
I don't exactly know what tabbing is, in the sense that I don't know where it starts and where it ends, kind of.
Okay, so well, this also depends on what the org team is doing and what they leave up to you, and it's also the same goes for the CA team. And sometimes you kind of take all the expertise role. So in general, the org team sends out a reg call, so people start regging. So the org team is responsible for getting all the information that of all the participants. But when it starts is when you get that information and you start inputting it in your software. You kind of so you officially the only job of the tab master is running the software, but there's a lot of small other stuff that you do as well. So you tell the runners what to do. You make sure you usually check whether the schedule actually allows for enough time. You also try to make sure that, especially with online tournaments, you try to make sure that usually it's the org team that does the running there, that they know when to hurry up. You schedule in the sense of saying like, hey, this is probably going to take another 10 minutes, so go have a cup of coffee for 10 minutes and then come back. So that's stuff that you do during the tournament. Usually I make a slideshow with like, these are the best features, these are the breaking teams, so you're responsible for the team break, officially not for the judge break, because the CAs have to set the breaking judges. Sometimes CAs don't know how to do this in the software, so then you have to do it yourself. But they do make the list themselves. You're in charge of making sure all the participants are in the software. You're in charge of making sure that all the scores are correct. So tabbing is mostly making sure the software works. All the participants are in, scores are in. You're there with the break. You make sure that
And sorry, the software puts the right people in the right rooms with the right judges,
yes.
Right?
You tell the software to make a draw, and then you make a draw. Then you just click a button, generate draw, and it generates a draw. However, the judges are separate from this because CAs always have a preference. So the CAs will usually input the judges, and after that you just show the draw to people. This depends. You can show it yourself, or you let the org team do it. It depends a bit on what you prefer or what they prefer. Yeah, I think that's more or less. I think maybe it's best thing to just start. I'm gonna share my screen in a bit. I'm gonna show you how to create tournament. Okay, so first of all, I'm gonna share a URL with you, which you need to save and bookmark in your browser, because this is gonna be like your holy book. It's your reference guide. It has anything that with DebbieCat, you can probably find it there. If not, you can ask about it in the Facebook groups that are there. How long till the draw, tapping discussions, and there's also the DebbieCat group and a DebbieCat Facebook page. There's two DebbieCat pages, one with questions about this and another one with general announcements when they have a new update. Okay, so let me see. So when you first want to start a tournament, you go to the URL just sent you, and then you go to installation, installing on Heroku, and then you click the button deploy to Heroku. If you don't have an Heroku account, it will prompt you to make one. I, of course, do have a Heroku account. I'm just going to show you, go to this one, already made one. So here you fill out the URL. So I made one, it says tab workshop .herokuapp.com. It does that automatically. I then choose a region. It's usually automatically on United States, so you always have to change it to Europe if you're in Europe. I don't think it matters that much whether you use Europe or the US. Don't change anything here. Just leave this as it is. Enter your email address. Change the time zone. So for me, it's Europe/Amsterdam. But if you're in UK, it can be Europe/London. So that depends, of course, where you are. What this does is if you are in Adjudicator itself, it will show you when things were changed with a timestamp. So you want it to be in the same time zone as you'll be tabbing in. Then you say deploy app. If you're doing this for the first time, it will prompt you to add credit card, add your credit card. You don't usually have to pay anything, except if you want to upgrade, which is for really big tournaments, especially if it runs for more than a week, which is barely never. Largest tournament I did was Amsterdam Open 2019 with 88 teams, and then we still didn't have to upgrade it. We might have had to if it was an online tournament, but I'm not sure. Usually don't. You might run out of database lines, but there's a grace period for like a week. So then you usually are like, nah, I'm not gonna pay for this. Deploy app. So then it starts creating the entire app. It takes a while. So that's why I've already done it. And then at some point you can be like, oh, view, and then you go to the correct site. All right. So then we're here. And I've made a couple user accounts. So everyone can sign in themselves and look around. Okay, so what you see when you've logged in there, that there is an admin area, an assistant area, and a public area. I think most of you are familiar with the public area. The assistant area is more or less similar to the admin area, except that you have a little bit less rights. So you can still enter results, enter feedback, check in certain people, and display the draw and emotion, which is the most important part. So usually you make a separate account for the org team where they can use the assistant account and the assistant area to display the draw and check in people. So as a tabber, you actually never use this area, you just use the admin area. So those three areas are at the front end of the website, and then there's also if everyone just can go to the admin area. I'm also going to show it to you. Let's see. Is here. You can find the edit database area, and this is the backend of your website. No one should have access to this except you. So one of the first things I do when I create this Tabbycat instance. So I first added the participants, but when I start adding the users, it's under authentication and authorization. And go to users. And then you can just add new one, add user. So if you add a user account for another tabber, you click both. If you want to add a separate one for the org team or for the org team, I don't think you have to add the super user status, but for CAs, you do want to use the super user status so they can make the draw and have access to the deployment motion before it has been converted. Okay, so let's see. First thing you do is that you go to here. You can create a new tournament. You can load generic data sets if you want to just play around. Otherwise, you just so you add a name, usually the entire name or maybe and then a short name here. This one will be displayed here, so it says B tab for me. It can also be like so. For Amsterdam Open, you can just write down Amsterdam 2019, for example, instead of that it says Amsterdam Open 2019. So the slug is the one that will be displayed in the URL. Number of preliminary rounds, so that's the open rounds. Number of team in the open break. So if you have, so if you do BP, make sure that for every out round, you have 4 teams. So if you have quarters, make sure you add 16 teams. But if you have semis, you only make sure that it's only 8 teams in the open break. And then you create the tournament. You can create multiple tournaments on one Tabbycat instance, and it might be nice if you're not using your own Heroku account, but on someone else's, and it might use a bit less, and you don't have to go through the hassle of creating a new Heroku Tabbycat instance every single time. But at some point you run out of database lines, especially if you do larger tournaments. So I prefer to make separate Heroku instances for every single tournament. So for now, I kind of propose that we start adding some data to the tournament I have created. So everyone just goes to the admin area, and then first of all, you go to setup and click on import data. There you find a couple of options: institutions, teams, adjudicators, and rooms. You always start with institutions because you can't really add teams or adjudicators without their institutions. Or you can, but then they would all be just open teams or IAs. So they would not be affiliated with an institution, which makes it a bit harder to clash them directly from their own institution. So because we're with 10, I propose that everyone adds their own institution and maybe a random other institution that they know of. When you open it, it shows you how to make a list of institutions. So you give them a full name and a code name. Make sure that when you use that code name, it's still recognizable as that institution. I'm not entirely sure whether people can see the code name. I do think they can, especially if you use it directly in their team names as well. Okay, so setup, import data, add institutions, add teams, add adjudicators, add rooms. You can also add room constraints. We'll talk about it later, and you can also add clashes. We'll talk about it later too. Then you can just start add institutions. And so I'm from Utrecht, so I'll add Utrecht Debating Society. And I either do UDS. I think that's preferred for my institution, but it can also be Utrecht. Sometimes you get institutions which you just don't know how to abbreviate them. And I try to use the full name, but sometimes that's a bit difficult. So then I try to use something that stands out together with the part of the world they're from, or they're sitting or something. So just add your own institution and maybe another institution. So if you get the reg data from the organizational team, what you start with is that you make a list of all the institutions, so you know which institutions you need to add. So then you don't have to go back to this page every single time. Usually it's a spreadsheet, so then I sort the sheet on the institutions, and then I know, like, okay, these are lists of institutions. Do take into account that people write their institutions differently. So, for example, if you have Bonaparte, which is Amsterdam, sometimes they write down Amsterdam, sometimes they write down ASDV Bonaparte, and sometimes just write down Bonaparte. So that's 3 different ways of writing down the same institution. So make sure you filter out those, otherwise people don't clash from each other. So here it shows you, like, if you have made a typo somewhere in the list you did in the previous screen, then it would show up. So so now it shows me it's correct. So it says the name is Utrecht Debating Society and the code is Utrecht. And then you save all institutions. Some people, I know that some people have written their own importers for TabbyCat. I am not that technical in the sense that, like, I don't know shit about coding, so I don't use importers, and I just do this all manually. I usually just copy paste a lot of stuff from the Excel sheets. I think the best way we can go about this, we don't need that large a tournament, so I think everyone can just add 2 teams. So now you can see that someone added Amsterdam twice. Probably 2 different people added Amsterdam twice. For now, when you want to add a random team for Amsterdam, just use this one. So if you want to add teams, if it's a mixed team, you just add them here. So you say, like, oh, there's 2 teams that have mixed teams. So one is from this institution, the other one is from another institution, or they're already done studying and no longer from an institution. Then they're unaffiliated. And otherwise, you can just add them for specific, for a very specific institution. Okay, so we're with 11 people, with me included. So let me see. I think everyone could add 2 people except for one person, which should add 4. So I will add 4, and the other ones can just add 2 teams. I don't care whether you use real names or not for this one. Just add 2 teams. Just add 2 teams, either for your own institution or a random other institution. I don't really care what you're gonna do. So here's something funny. So if you are speaking for UDS, for Utrecht Bank Society, you can call it Utrecht A. Some people do that, so then you just make this an A and it will show up on the tab as Utrecht A. Instead of you have to type out Utrecht A specifically, you can just do the A, make sure this one is checked, and then it will automatically show up as such. Otherwise, you have to write it down completely. So this one is, I'm just going to call them dinos. I'm not really gonna make up names, I'm just gonna call them Dino 1 and Dino 2. And I'm just gonna call this one offices. You don't, for this specific exercise, I don't think you should really care about what names you're gonna use. You can just use A and B for a team, or give them your own name. So I can call this one my own name. I'm just not an office, but I don't care. And I'm just gonna give this my boyfriend's name. He just looks at me like, what the fuck are you doing? Well, for Utrecht, I can be like Carmen, Silke. I think Friso is still waiting, but I don't care. So this time it doesn't show you a separate list with like, hey, are you sure you added this? Wait, I didn't show you something else. So you have to double check to make sure that you've added everything. But if you're using private URLs and you want to use the emailing system, make sure that when you add the team names, that you do add their email accounts, email addresses in the same order. You can either use a new line or use tabs or commas to keep those separated, and the same goes for the email addresses. Is everyone's okay so far? If I'm going too fast, please tell me.
Where can we see the teams that we just made? And the
okay, yeah. So share screen. So for the institutions, you can always see it when you add teams or judges. You can just scroll down and see the entire list. But you also have under setup, you also have participants. So you click participants. Now my Wi-Fi is a bit slow. But it will give you a list of the participants that are in there. Okay, now. So now we have the speakers, but now we still need the judges. It's more or less the same way as you would do this for teams. So you just add adjudicators. Doesn't really matter how many you add. I think we need 6 judges in total. We might want a bit more, so I think everyone can just add 1 judge. Yeah, it would be fine. So you just add 1 judge. Let's see. What are we gonna do for this one? Great. So here you can change the rating. Tabicat as a standard just sets it to from 0 to 5, and the standard rating is 2.5. You can change this in the configuration, and then you can set it to usually 1 to 10 is preferred by the CAs. And that's because they usually use the Euros judge scale that has been made recently, which is also really useful for feedback. So you can change the rating here. You can also just keep it as 2.5. I usually do this because the CAs take quite a long time to decide on judge ratings, and I usually update the ratings afterwards. I usually prefer to have the participants list like a week before the tournament, because some days I might be able to work in it, but other days I'd rather not. So for example, if my Friday night is really full, I don't want to have to last minute enter all those participants while I don't have time. So you can change your rating here or change it later. And also add email addresses. For teams, it's less important to add email addresses because they usually can just use the public URL. For judges, it's kind of more important because private URLs are really important for ballots. You'd rather not use a public URL for ballots. You can do this with offline tournaments and double check ballots with the paper ones. However, with online tournaments, you can't double check this as much. So therefore, you do want to provide private URLs for ballots. When you're using online tournaments and you use Taptastic, do make sure to enter all the email addresses for all the participants, because it needs those email addresses to link them directly to the tab in Discord as well as to the Zoom allocations. So now we've added institutions, teams, and adjudicators, and then we still need to add rooms. This is something that I usually do last minute because I'm not always sure which venues will be used, what their names are, etc. Sometimes I can get them in advance earlier, especially when we're using online tournaments, because usually then they also provide those names in the Discord chat as well, with separate channels for each room, so people can get their feedback there or preprint those rooms. And there's also been a tournament that was completely on Discord, so then you also know those rooms in advance. So we'll only be needing 6 rooms, so I'm not gonna let you add those rooms this time, but you just give a room name, so this is room 1, and then you give them priority. So the higher the priority, the more likely it is you're going to use this room. So if you have this really big tournament and your org team isn't sure how many rooms you're going to use, they just have like a lot of rooms, like an entire list of rooms. They usually give this list in advance, especially if it's a large tournament. And then you just add all those rooms. If you know which ones are further away, you make farther away. You just if they're farther away, you make sure you leave the farthest out. So you give them a lower priority. So sometimes a couple of teams drop out, so then you can close a room, and then you can make sure by giving the higher or lower priority that those rooms won't be selected. Usually just give them a random number, so usually I use 20, so I can go lower but also above it. So for out rounds, sometimes make a separate room, which is called announcement hall or finals room or something. and you just give them a way higher priority, so it will automatically allocate them there. That's right. Yeah. You can also just give them a lower priority, so I don't want the announcement hall to be used in the in rounds, but I do want it to be used in the out rounds. You can also select them separately, so you don't miss. Now it shows you the room names and the priority. If you've made a typo one way or the other, it shows you. Now you can check whether you've done it correctly. Alright. So room categories and constraints. What you usually do with this, if people don't want to be streamed, you make separate. That's especially for online tournaments. You make sure that some rooms can be streamed and other rooms cannot be streamed. But you can also do this, for example, if people can't walk that far, you give them a room close to the announcement hall, or you make sure that CAs get a room close to the tap room, so they can come back to the tap room quicker and start doing the drawing. So room categories, you just give them a name like, close to the tap room. You give them a description. I don't usually use this because it's almost never necessary. Only with online tournaments I sometimes do it. Then what you do is you can, this is kind of the annoying thing, is that you can mark rooms as not streaming or mark rooms as streaming. So, but if you mark a room as streaming, no wait, you can only mark, I have to say this correctly, okay. So if certain people don't want to be streamed, hey, a cat, Amber, nice. So if people don't want to be streamed, you can just mark a couple of rooms as those rooms are for people that don't want to be streamed. So you can, I believe you can select multiple rooms in this. And then later on you have to, in the other database area, I believe was the case, you can add the teams or the churches that don't want to be streamed. It might also be possible to do this with the room constraints. I edit them directly, but I usually just prefer to add a database. Same goes for clashes. So sometimes you have a mixed team, and one of them is a Leiden debater and the other one is an Amsterdam debater. But you still want those teams, that team to be clashed from both Amsterdam churches as well as Leiden churches. So what you can then do is add a team institution conflict. So it automatically gives those, because they're from Amsterdam, as their institutions are this, so they will be automatically clashed. But if it's an open team, then you have to specifically be like, or if a certain person is like, so I've been debating at this debating society as well, so I'm also clashed from them. Make sure that they are clashed from that institution. So CPU A can, for example, be clashed from PCL. And they will also be clashed from judges that are from that institution. And you scroll to the bottom, save institution conflicts. The annoying thing with this is that sometimes it doesn't save the institution, save the conflicts properly, especially with team adjudicator clashes. So usually I just prefer to add all the clashes in the database area. So how do you do that? You go to the database area, and then you go to judge-judge conflicts, judge-team conflicts. So usually it's judge-team conflicts. Sometimes there's judge-judge conflicts. This doesn't happen as often. I have seen in a Clash forum an example that someone's like, "Can I please be Clash from those people because it's really hard to share them." So then you say like, "Oh, let's add an adjudicator team conflict." So say like, "Okay, Yuri is Clash from this team." So Yuri is from Erasmus, but he's for some reason Clash from Amsterdam. So you save, or you save and add another, depending on whether you need to add another judge team conflict. So let me just gonna add one now, because I don't think it's that important to have an entire list.